Ancient Pythagoras quotes, "Men learn too late in life." Before there was Stoicism, before there was modern philosophy, there was a man who changed how we understand the universe forever. His name, Pythagoras. Most of us know Pythagoras for that theorem we learned in high school math. But what if I told you that this ancient Greek philosopher had wisdom so profound that most men only come to understand it in the twilight of their lives? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the mind of one of history's greatest thinkers and uncovering the forgotten quotes of Pythagoras that men typically learn too late in life. Before we begin this journey together, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. This isn't just another philosophy video. These are practical insights that could quite literally transform how you navigate life's biggest challenges. Unlike most content you'll find about Pythagoras, we're not here to talk about math formulas. Instead, we'll explore how this brilliant mind, born nearly 600 years ago, somehow understood truths about manhood, purpose, and living well that many of us only grasp when our best years are behind us. I spent months researching Pythagoras beyond his mathematical contributions. What I discovered were principles so timeless they feel like they could have been written yesterday, not in ancient Greece around 570 BCE. So let's begin with understanding who this man really was. Who was Pythagoras? Pythagoras wasn't just a mathematician. He was a philosopher, a mystic, a scientist, and the founder of a spiritual brotherhood that influenced Western thought for centuries. Born on the island of Samos in Greece around 570 BCE, Pythagoras traveled extensively throughout Egypt, Babylon, and possibly as far as India, absorbing wisdom from various ancient traditions. What made Pythagoras revolutionary was his ability to blend scientific observation with spiritual insight. He didn't see numbers merely as tools for calculation. He saw them as the very language of nature and divinity. When he eventually settled in Croton in southern Italy, he founded a school, more accurately, a community of devoted followers. The Pythagoreans, as they were called, lived by strict codes of conduct, studied mathematics, music, astronomy, and philosophy, and even followed specific dietary restrictions. His followers were divided into two groups, the acousmatikoi, or listeners, who simply followed his teachings without questioning, and the mathematikoi, or learners, who were initiated into the deeper mysteries of his philosophy. Interestingly, Pythagoras wrote nothing down himself. All we know of his teachings comes through his students and later philosophers who documented his ideas. This oral tradition means his wisdom was meant to be lived, not just read. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Not just hear his words, but understand how they apply to our lives as men in the modern world. Because these aren't just ancient quotes. They're principles that many of us realize too late, would have transformed our lives if we'd understood them sooner. Quote 1 on self-mastery. "No man is free who cannot command himself." This might be Pythagoras' most powerful insight about manhood. In just 8 words, he captures what takes many of us decades to learn. True freedom isn't about external circumstances. It's about internal discipline. Interview subject. I spent my 20s and 30s thinking freedom meant doing whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. It took losing everything to realize that my freedom to indulge every impulse had actually made me a slave. This paradox of freedom is something most men don't grasp until midlife or later. We confuse license with liberty. We think the fewer restraints on our behavior, the freer we are. But Pythagoras recognized something profound: a man who cannot control his appetites, his emotions, his reactions, is not free at all. He's ruled by the very things he should be ruling. Think about it. When you can't resist checking your phone every 5 minutes, are you truly free? When you can't control your anger in traffic, are you free? When you're driven by the pursuit of status symbols you don't even really want, is that freedom? Let me show you a simple exercise Pythagoreans would practice daily. Before sleep, they would ask themselves 3 questions. What did I do wrong today? What did I do right? What did I leave undone? This nightly reflection was designed to build self-awareness, the first step toward self-mastery. Here's my challenge to you. For the next week, try this Pythagorean nightly review. Note the patterns that emerge. Where are you failing to command yourself? Where are you giving away your freedom? Many of you watching will be surprised by what you discover. And if you're willing to share your experiences, drop them in the comments below. Quote 2 on friendship and community. Friends share all things. This deceptively simple statement contains one of Pythagoras' most radical ideas, one that challenges how most modern men approach relationships. Today, we live in an age of individualism and superficial connections. We might have hundreds of social media friends, but few people we can truly count on in crisis. Pythagoras established a community where resources, ideas, and support were shared freely among members. The Pythagorean Brotherhood wasn't just a philosophical school, it was a way of life built on deep mutual commitment. I've interviewed dozens of men in their 70s and 80s for this video, asking what they wish they'd understood earlier in life. Almost universally, they mention the importance of cultivating deep friendships. Elderly man interview. I spent my prime years chasing career, achievements, and neglecting friendships. Now, those achievements just gather dust, but the friendships I failed to nurture, that's what I miss most. The research backs this up. Harvard's 80-plus year study on adult development found that close relationships are the strongest predictor of both happiness and longevity, stronger than wealth, fame, or social class. Yet many men today prioritize everything else above friendship. We tell ourselves we're too busy, that we'll focus on relationships someday. Pythagoras would say this is a profound mistake. The Pythagoreans had specific practices for strengthening their community bonds. One was the practice of mutual correction. Friends were expected to honestly, but kindly point out each other's flaws. This level of honesty terrifies most modern men. We prefer friendships where everyone pretends everything is fine. But Pythagoras understood that real growth happens when we allow trusted friends to see us clearly and speak truth into our lives. Ask yourself, do you have friends who know your weaknesses and still choose to walk alongside you? Do you have friends who will tell you uncomfortable truths? If not, you haven't yet experienced what Pythagoras meant by true friendship. Quote 3 on silence and wisdom. Silence is better than unmeaning words. In our hyper-connected world of hot takes, instant reactions, and constant commentary, this Pythagorean principle might be the most countercultural of all. Pythagoras was famous for requiring his students to observe a period of silence, sometimes lasting 5 years before they were permitted to speak in his presence. While that might seem extreme, the principle behind it is profound. Most men today feel compelled to have an opinion on everything, to respond immediately to every stimulus, to fill every silence. We've lost the art of thoughtful contemplation before speaking. Think about the men you most respect. Aren't they often those who speak less, but whose words carry weight when they do speak? There's a reason for this connection between silence and wisdom. When we're constantly consuming information and outputting reactions, we never create the mental space needed for deep understanding. We develop strong opinions weakly held rather than well-considered perspectives. Pythagoras would teach his students to practice intentional silence daily. Here's a simple version you can try. For 20 minutes each day, completely disconnect from all media and conversation. Don't just sit there checking your watch. Use this time to deeply consider a single, important question in your life. Many men realize too late in life how much energy they wasted on meaningless words, arguments that didn't matter, opinions that weren't informed, conversations that led nowhere. As Pythagoras taught, meaningful silence will always be more valuable than meaningless speech. Quote 4. On balance and moderation. The most momentous thing in human life is the art of winning the soul to good or evil. Pythagoras understood something that takes many men a lifetime to learn. Character isn't formed through grand, heroic moments, but through the accumulation of small daily choices. The Pythagoreans practiced what they called the mean, finding the balanced middle path between extremes. This wasn't about being lukewarm or uncommitted. Rather, it was about recognizing that virtue lies in balance. Take courage, for example. Too little courage becomes cowardice, but too much courage without wisdom becomes recklessness. True virtue, Pythagoras taught, lies in finding the perfect balance. Interview subject. I always thought moderation was for boring people. I wanted to live at the extremes. It took me years to realize that sustainable happiness isn't found in constant peaks and valleys. It's found in walking a centered path. This applies to every area of life. Work without rest leads to burnout. Rest without work leads to stagnation. Discipline without flexibility becomes rigidity. Flexibility without discipline becomes chaos. Many men learn this lesson the hard way, through failed relationships, health crises, or professional burnout. They pursue one aspect of life to the exclusion of all others, only to discover too late the importance of balance. Pythagoras taught his followers to regularly audit their lives for imbalance. Where are you overindulging? Where are you neglecting important areas? Remember, the soul is won or lost not in dramatic moments, but in the accumulation of daily choices that either balance or unbalance your life. Quote 5. On harmony and purpose. There is geometry in the humming of the strings. There is music in the spacing of the spheres. This poetic statement reveals one of Pythagoras's most beautiful discoveries, the mathematical relationship between musical notes. He found that harmonious sounds follow precise mathematical ratios. But this wasn't just a scientific observation for Pythagoras. It represented something much deeper, the fundamental harmony that underlies all of existence. He believed that the universe itself operates according to mathematical principles that create a cosmic harmony. How does this ancient insight apply to modern manhood? It's about finding your place in the greater harmony of existence. Interview subject. I spent 20 years in a career that made me miserable because I thought success meant fitting someone else's definition. When I finally found work that aligned with who I truly am, it felt like coming home, like finding my note in the cosmic chord. Many men spend decades trying to force themselves to be someone they're not, pursuing careers that don't suit them, maintaining relationships that drain them, living lives disconnected from their authentic nature. Pythagoras would say this creates dissonance rather than harmony. Just as each musical note has its perfect place in a chord, each person has their unique contribution to make. Finding your purpose isn't about grand achievements. It's about discovering where your authentic self resonates with the needs of the world around you. When you find that alignment, life stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like participation in something greater than yourself. The tragedy is that many men only discover this harmony late in life, after years of playing the wrong notes. Pythagoras would urge us to listen carefully to the dissonance in our lives. It's often pointing us toward the adjustments needed to find our true place in the cosmic symphony. Quote 6. On legacy and immortality. As long as man continues to be the ruthless destroyer of lower living beings, he will never know health or peace. For as long as men massacre animals, they will kill each other. This quote might surprise you coming from an ancient Greek philosopher, but Pythagoras was ahead of his time in recognizing the connection between how we treat the vulnerable and how we treat each other. The Pythagoreans were famously vegetarian, not primarily for health reasons, but because they believed in the interconnectedness of all life. They understood that habits of violence or compassion in one area of life inevitably affect all others. Beyond its literal meaning about diet, this quote contains a profound insight about legacy, how we treat those with less power than ourselves, whether animals, children, employees, or anyone vulnerable, reveals our true character, far more than how we treat our equals or superiors. Interview subject. Young men often think legacy is about achievements, buildings with their name on them, wealth accumulated, power wielded. It took me decades to realize that my true legacy is in the lives I touched and how I treated those who couldn't benefit me in return. Pythagoras recognized something that science has now confirmed. Cruelty and compassion are both contagious. The neural pathways that enable violence or kindness in one context become stronger and more available in all contexts. This is why he saw the mistreatment of animals as incompatible. with a peaceful human society. The principle extends to all relationships. How you treat your subordinates at work affects how you treat your children at home. How you speak to service workers influences how you'll eventually speak to loved ones. Many men reach the end of their lives and realize too late that their legacy isn't what they thought it would be. The man who succeeded in business but ruled his family through fear leaves behind adult children who avoid him. The man who cut ethical corners for profit finds his wealth brings him no joy in his final years. Pythagoras understood that true immortality comes not from our accomplishments, but from the values we embody and transmit to future generations. Conclusion and call to action. Pythagoras died nearly 2,500 years ago, yet his wisdom speaks directly to the challenges men face today. Let's quickly revisit the 6 quotes we've explored. No man is free who cannot command himself. Friends share all things. Silence is better than unmeaning words. The most momentous thing in human life is the art of winning the soul, to good or evil. There is geometry in the humming of the strings. There is music in the spacing of the spheres. As long as man continues to be the ruthless destroyer of lower living beings, he will never know health or peace. These aren't just ancient philosophical statements. They're practical principles that many men only come to understand through painful experience later in life. The question I want to leave you with is this. Will you be among those who learn these lessons too late? Or will you have the wisdom and courage to embrace these truths now, while you still have time to shape your life according to them? I believe every man watching this has the capacity for the kind of self-awareness and growth that Pythagoras taught. But it requires something rare in our culture: the willingness to question your current path and make changes when necessary. If this video resonated with you, here are 3 things I invite you to do. First, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. We explore timeless wisdom like this regularly on this channel. Second, share this video with a man in your life who might benefit from hearing these insights now, rather than learning them too late. And finally, drop a comment below sharing which of these Pythagorean principles struck you most deeply. I read every comment and respond to as many as I can. Until next time, remember Pythagoras' words. The beginning is the half of everything. Your new beginning starts now.